Funny enough, Temple of Doom is actually the first Indiana Jones movie I ever saw, and when I was really young, too. I'm only saying this because I think it's interesting that it's gone on to be considered the weakest of the original trilogy, and also the darkest. Okay, maybe it deserves that. When George Lucas came to Spielberg with Raiders of the Lost Ark, he told him he had ideas for 3 stories, and Spielberg had to direct all 3. In true George Lucas fashion, he didn't have an idea. The two filmmakers attribute the dark tone of the movie to the fact that they were both going through breakups at the time. Also, George thought it should mirror the dark tone of Empire Strikes Back. The much darker tone would ultimately prove to be too dark for critics. The movie contains an evil, heart-stealing cult that may or may not be racially insensitive, child slavery, Indiana Jones turning evil at one point, and a majority of the film taking place in a dark, humorless cave. There's also been plenty of criticism over the new addition of a sidekick named Short Round, and a new female damsel who was the direct opposite of Marion in Raiders. Instead of being a badass, she's just screaming her head off most of the time. The thing about Spielberg, though, is that he's always had enough hindsight to know how his movies affected people.
Raiders, of course, got great reviews, and Last Crusade got terrific reviews, but Temple of Doom didn't do very well. The reviews were awful.
And he mostly looks back on Temple of Doom as a time where the best thing that came out of it was that he met Kate Capshaw, who he would later marry. The events of the movie take place before Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I wonder how much that actually matters. Indiana Jones starts off in China on an adventure, but he and his sidekick, Short Round, and a singer named Willie, yes, that is a silly name, end up in India, and go on a search to find sacred stones that will save a ravaged village. But first they have to brave the Temple of Doom. Despite all the negativity surrounding this movie, Temple of Doom was a hit with audiences. And when I was probably only 7 or 8, I loved this movie. And while the middle section of the film does get pretty dark and dreary, the climax is a lot of fun. In hindsight, I appreciate that they wanted to do something different. And while this movie is dark, it still has the sense of fun and adventure that these movies should have. At least for the first and third parts. Even Short Round I don't mind, despite the fact that they never really explain what happened to him. Although I guess it makes sense, traveling with Indiana Jones is probably not a responsible thing for children to do. It may be the weakest of the original trilogy, but as far as Spielberg movies go, I still think it's a lot of fun. And like I said, the film was a hit, so apparently audiences thought so too. It may not be perfect, but it's still Indiana Jones.